And we are live. And this is the TWIS Minion Science Island Hangout. I am Ed in Connecticut, and joining me is our regular Hangout participant, Dale, in Canada. Saskatoon?
That's right.
Something like that. A bunch of S's.
You nailed it.
Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. There was a Gary Cooper movie many years ago, and I can't think of the name of it, and that was in Saskatchewan.
Oh,
it was a Royal Mountie. It was an actual Mountie in the movie.
No, that's funny. Awesome.
I don't know what kind of an accent he had, though. He's got a... I don't know if he pulled off the Canadian accent at all, but any of it.
Just have to say A a lot.
We're going to start. We have a bunch of very interesting stories. Got an animal evolution. It is amazing how animals evolve behavior and how they look. And a very amazing one, animal mimicry. And it's a chick, the Nanoscale hypoaria family. And it has this amazing defense where it's evolved into looking like a caterpillar that's toxic. And that's one of the stories we'll cover. We've got some space news. Well, I have to admit, I have been dissing the Chinese space program. But they just launched their 200th mission. And they're in a collaboration with Brazil, amazingly. So, you know, 2 thumbs up for China. Got another story. This is the key to space travel is going to be collaboration because now the European Space Agency is proposing joint missions with Russia to the moon. We've got one of the best blogs. If you're interested in science-based medicine, that's what it's called, science-based medicine. And there's a recent article talking about the risks of complementary alternative medicine. And we got some injectable 3D vaccines. And a promising compound that could eliminate the malaria parasite, and some technology stories as well. I'm going to dig into the first one, and hopefully my screen share will work properly. Can you see it?
I can see it. It's good.
Okay, that's the YouTube video. And let me start actually with the article in the Loom. This is Carl Zimmerman's blog. Okay, that appears to be working as well. There we go. There's a picture of this little baby chick. And next to it is the caterpillar that it is imitating. And reading from Carl Zimmer's article. When you hatch out of an egg and find yourself in a nest up in a tree in the rainforest of Peru, you can't fly. All you can do is sit there and wait for your parents to come along and bring you food. In other words, you're easy pickings. So what kind of a strategy, me paraphrasing, would you want to employ to avoid being eaten? In the case of this particular bird, the Nanoscale hypoaria, or something like that, which is commonly known as the Cinereus mourner, what they have adapted, you grow bright orange plumage. You make yourself absurdly easy to see. In 2012, the team they were looking at this particular baby chick and wondering why was it so bright. Chick also becomes drab as it grows up. Researchers could only base their study on museum specimens, so they had to go to the Amazon jungle. Oh no, it's the Peruvian rainforest. And they proposed that the chicks were actually ensuring their survival by growing bright feathers. They might be poisonous, for example, with toxic chemicals in their leaves, and their bright leaves could be just a warning, or perhaps they were harmless and were mimicking some unknown animal. And that you can see in the picture, the animal they're trying to mimic is the caterpillar. And Gustav Landeno, the University of California at Riverside, and his colleagues have observed the Center aureus moriner chick in the wild, and they were struck by the way the chicks creep around their nest, like a caterpillar. Not just any old caterpillar, but this toxic caterpillar, which has not been named. This particular caterpillar lives near where the Cenosaurus moriner have their nest. It's about the same size of the chick, and its hairs are tipped with an irritating toxin. And the interesting thing is it not only goes beyond the yellow, but if I move down, you can see the white tips on the chick, which exactly, once again, mimic the caterpillar. Now, what I'm going to do, and can you see the YouTube video?
I can, yeah.
All right. There's our little bird.
Wow.
That is amazing. Now, how in the world did that particular behavior evolve? I don't know how old that particular species is, but I mean, to have that coloration only with the baby chick and the way it moves.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sure there's a natural explanation for sure. It looks exactly like a caterpillar.
Yeah, and that's not the way baby chicks behave. I mean, maybe some of them are very quiet, hiding down in their nest, or they're chirping all the time, they want food. But this particular caterpillar, bird, it really looks exactly like a caterpillar.
And having that sort of defense mechanism gives it a distinct survival advantage.
And okay, normally, these chicks have an 80% predation rate. So there are a lot of predators in that particular rainforest. And the parent bird isn't around, I guess, very much. Obviously, it's hunting for food. So, but it's amazing how, like the feathers that we can see, how did they adapt to look exactly like that? What you see, I'll cut away from the video once you see the feeding habits, but it almost looks like the adult bird doesn't right off the bat recognize the chick. It doesn't feed the chick immediately. It's only when the chick exposes itself and starts chirping that the adult bird feeds it.
Wow.
That is pretty amazing.
Huh. That's really neat.
So that was, it's, as I said, it's mind-boggling how nature works. And it would have to be, I guess, as baby birds of this particular species begin to take on that coloration, those that look more like that particular caterpillar don't get eaten. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Why don't we jump into some health news? And this is an article that you posted, I know, Dale, on Facebook. And it is probably, as I say, my favorite skeptical science-based blog. And it's Stephen Novella of the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. Great podcast.
Yeah, he does. So yeah, this one is the risk of CAM treatments for cancer. And so he goes on to say, what's the harm? It's an insidious idea when used as a justification for unscientific medical treatments. The argument is typically put forward with the assumption that direct physical harm is the only type of harm that can result from such treatments. So as long as they aren't toxic, there is no downside to trying them. Harm comes in many forms, however. Delayed effective treatment, wasted time and energy, financial harm, the psychological harm of false hope, and the downstream effects of instilling unscientific beliefs regarding healthcare. Those are all good points. One other form of harm is physical, but is not due to direct physical damage or toxicity. Rather, it is caused by CAM treatments interacting with proven therapies. A recent survey presented at the Clinical Oncology Society of Australia at their annual scientific meeting explored the potential for such interactions among oncology patients. Lead researcher Sally Brooks found that in addition to vitamins and minerals, cancer patients were most interested in fish oil, turmeric, coenzyme Q10, milk thistle, green tea, ginger, lactobacillus, licorice, astragalus, and reishi mushrooms. As I've written many times before, herbs and drugs, but many patients do not treat them as such because they are regulated and marketed as supplements, more like food than drugs. So there are concerns that many vitamin herbal products may interact with chemotherapy or radiation therapy in order to reduce effectiveness or even increase side effects. The research on antioxidant supplementation, for example, raises some concerns, but is equivocal. Part of the effectiveness of chemotherapy comes from increasing reactive oxygen species, which cause damage to cells. ROS damage both cause cancerous and healthy cells. They damage both of them. So they're part of the desired effects of chemotherapy, but also the side effects. It is therefore possible that antioxidants may decrease the side effects of chemotherapy, but also decrease the effects. The balance between efficacy and side effects is carefully managed in chemotherapy. And if patients are taking antioxidants, especially without telling their oncologist, this can affect that careful balance. Systematic reviews to date have concluded that the evidence for the net effect of antioxidants in chemotherapy is mixed and insufficient quality to come to any solid recommendations. Other effects are also of concern. Turmeric, for example, may decrease the effectiveness of chemotherapy by interfering with the mechanisms which chemotherapy induces cell death in cancer cells. Turmeric also interferes with the cytochrome P450 system, which is important for the metabolism of many drugs, including some chemotherapy agents, and therefore may increase side effects and toxicity. Astragalus has effects on the immune system. While preliminary evidence indicates or suggests this may be helpful in cancer treatment, it may worsen autoimmune diseases and interact with immunosuppressive drugs. So overall, the evidence for any benefit from the commonly taken herbal supplements as adjunctive care for the particular cancer is mixed and preliminary. At the same time, these agents are drugs that can cause side effects and interact with chemotherapeutic agents, causing photosensitivity, interacting with metabolism and clearance, and perhaps reducing effectiveness. Some may actually prove useful as well, but the complexity of their effects requires careful study, which is often lacking. Patients often do not disclose supplement use to their physicians and therefore may not have an opportunity to receive specific advice on such use. It is also important to recognize that studies involving carefully standardized supplements are difficult to apply to the real world because the supplement industry is so poorly regulated. Many recent studies have found that the supplements are often contaminated. They have variable doses and even contain product substitutions. It is very difficult, therefore, for patients to even know what they are getting. While further research for individual herbal product in specific doses for specific cancers and in combination with specific cancer treatments is required before we can make definitive statements about their safety and efficacy, there is also research into the net outcomes of those taking so-called CAM along with their cancer treatments. So what evidence we have is also preliminary, but not favorable. Some studies, for example, show that patients using CAM along with standard treatments have a decreased survival. They are not randomized, and so conclusions regarding cause and effect are difficult, but such evidence does suggest caution. Other studies find that quality of life, often touted as the main benefit of CAM, is also decreased in cancer patients using CAM. The conclusion, overall the evidence for the effectiveness, side effects, drug interactions, and net effects on survival and quality of life with herbs and other unconventional treatments for cancer is of poor quality, showing mixed and complex results. With herbs, since they often have active pharmacological effects, there's the potential for benefit, but also the potential for harm, as with any drug. The claims made for such treatments often greatly exceed the evidence. Patients, therefore, are generally met with misleading information, suggesting efficacy where the evidence is thin and downplaying the potential for harm and negative interactions. Because such treatments are promoted as alternative, patients also are often reluctant to discuss these issues with their physicians, who may be in the best position to advise them on the potential risks and benefits. As Brooks and others also point out, unconventional treatments may also present a financial burden at a time when patients are already under financial stress in their illness and perhaps reduced ability to work. They also may experience psychological stress from being pressurized by well-meaning but misguided friends and family members, pushing them to try unconventional treatments at a time when they are vulnerable due to their illness. The underlying source of all this unnecessary risk and stress for cancer and other patients is the basic notion of complementary or alternative medicine. The marketing of a subset of treatments as CAM creates an artificial double standard, one in which the rules of evidence are altered, informed consent is compromised by misinformation, product standards are lower, and patients often do not feel comfortable discussing such treatments with their physicians. Eliminating this double standard could be an effective first step in correcting such problems. Said it like it is.
Yeah, so many things. I guess that's a subject. My friends on Facebook, several of them use what are alternative medicines, the so-called natural medicines. And I don't really spend a lot of time trying to debate with them. I'll just, mention, because they're not going to change their mind. And the benefits, I don't know them, I'm not their doctor or anything, but what I read behind the lines and everything is, it makes them feel better. So it's the placebo effect, I strongly suspect.
Yeah, and natural is not always better. It's a fallacy. Anthrax is natural. All sorts of things are natural, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily good for us. Synthetic medicine is stuff that we've either created or we've taken things that are natural and used them, but they're followed up with tens of thousands of patients in multiple studies with epidemiological evidence, across multiple studies. And it comes down to, do you want to go where the evidence is, or do you want to believe the snake oil salesman that rarely, occasionally, might be right, but it's just by chance, nothing else? Do you want to believe somebody that may be right about their snake oil. That might only be correct just from chance itself. And I think the answer is no. I think if anybody understood what CAM is and really knew the evidence behind it, people would not take it.
Yeah, it's well, one problem, of course, which the article mentioned, is the fact that it's not regulated, or certainly not regulated very well. So when you get that bottle, you don't really know what's in the bottle. And with medication, doses is critical. How much dosage? So even though you may read a story somewhere about a particular naturally growing plant, and there's something in that plant that may be of some benefit, what you have to know is the dosage. And even if that's true, are you getting the required dosage when you buy that bottle? You don't know, because it's not really regulated.
Yeah,
It's not like a prescription medicine.
your best hope by far is full disclosure to your doctor. That's not perfect either, but if you want to eliminate as much probability as possible, where you want to eliminate the probability of making mistakes, you want to discuss it with your doctor, because you're depending on somebody now that has been educated through both the university and college systems. At different particular decades, they've been introduced to medicine. Plus, you're also tapping on all their experience and interaction with other doctors. So it's not, the medical system isn't perfect, but if you want to significantly, in a massive way, eliminate the probability of chance of something not working that well, you need to see your doctor. It won't be perfect, but it's as close as we can get at this point in time.
Yeah, and I'm a hypochondriac. So when I have any kind of symptom, the slightest symptom, the first thing I do is I go on to Google and I do a search, and I find out, and there's 96 people saying, oh, I got the same thing as you, and try this, it'll work perfectly. Well, if you're talking about, first of all, you don't know what it is. And it's not going to tell you what it is. And if you go on to some of those medical sites, they're always going to tell you it's something horrendous with disclaimers. If you think it's serious, talk to your doctor. I'm a diabetic. I mean, there's all kinds of diets on the internet. Well, the person you need to talk to is a nutritionist. You don't go onto the internet and other people tell you what kind of diet you're supposed to be on. You go to a professional nutritionist.
It's a good point. The internet has made an entire new population of hypochondriacs. It really has.
Yes, yes.
Everybody has access to information, and a lot of it's good, but because of our amygdala, we tend to look at the worst possible scenario. And our brains take us there from, that fight or flight amygdala-like process. It wants to believe in the worst case scenario. And you have to use the neocortex of the brain to try to bring yourself out of thinking. You have to logic your way out of those negative thoughts that are very primal. And your neocortex needs to bring you out of that. And a lot of times, people don't have significant logic to understand that what they're reading is worst case scenarios that are unlikely. But there is a really easy way that you can challenge people that are worried about the worst possible scenario. And this is good information for anybody out there that's a hypochondriac. This came from a doctor friend, and he said, how does the patient present? I said, what exactly do you mean? He goes, how do they look, how do they sound, how do they feel? And if I look at you, Ed, you look great. So to think that there's something seriously wrong with you is highly unlikely just because of how you present. And that's an important thing to remember. If people take their blood pressure, they tend to, I've had people come up to me and they're panicking over their readings. And it's one reading. You need to take many, many, many readings, average them out over a long period of time, and then make a determination. Is your blood pressure high? So things have to be put into perspective, and a lot of times people forget, how does the person look? How do I look? Do I look healthy? That's a really good indicator of your overall health.
And I have a blood pressure monitor, and I take reading. Well, when I first got it, I was taking readings every freaking day. Actually, I had below average blood pressure, but that's good in general. So the thing is, like you say, you've got to. Same thing with my blood sugar level. So I've got a monitor. I take a look at my blood sugar level. One reading outside the normal zone is almost meaningless. Thanksgiving, Christmas, I go out and I eat bunches of stuff. My blood sugar level is going to go through the roof. It's just, you know, the next day, couple of days, it's going to go back down. You know, if you go to doctors, from what I've read, your blood pressure will almost always go up. So the reading you get in the doctor's office, if anything, is more likely to be higher than normal.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And many people have white coat syndrome, where just being in the room with the doctor will elevate your blood pressure because your fight and flight kicks in. There's a fear response, and your blood pressure is supposed to rise when you're in fear. Your body is preparing to run. The blood pressure needs to go up to be able to compensate for the run. It's very normal. Some people, even the act of having a blood pressure cuff on their arm, their blood pressure will go up just because the cuff's on their arm, right? So to get readings that are accurate, I know of people, and it's more common than you would think, is they have to actually calm themselves, and they have to take their blood pressure while they're laying down watching a movie and they're completely relaxed to get an accurate reading, because they can tell that their fear response has been heightened and the blood pressure naturally goes up, which is what's supposed to happen. So if you're relaxed and chilled out and your heart isn't racing and you don't have a fear response and your blood pressure is still high, after you take it multiple times over a month, then you'll have a better idea of where your blood pressure is actually at. And then and only then, under the advice of a doctor, you should, you know, make some decisions based on that information.
Yeah, Dr. Novella, and this was in one of his podcasts, talked about how when he's treating a patient, all he has to say is the word cancer, and they block out everything he says. Now the fact is, almost all cancers are very, very treatable nowadays. Don't want to have cancer or anything like that, but it's not the death sentence it used to be. And if stage 1 cancer, you can, you know, almost, you know, like any other disease, you get it treated. Odds are you're going to live long, normal life and everything. But he said, you know, as soon as they hear that word cancer, that's it. So
I watched a great interview with 10 oncologists. This was last year, and you know, guys at the top of their field, oncologists at the top of their field, and they asked them the question about, you know, how successful are we with cancer and treating it? And they all agreed, there was no dissension, they all agreed that cancer is very quickly, all the different types of cancer is becoming a chronic disease where it's treatable but it doesn't kill you. And we're very quickly approaching that day when all cancers will be very, very treatable. So, and as it is right now, like you said, the mass amount of, you know, the different types of cancers are very, very treatable. And it's not great, it's not good, but the treatments are there now. They're getting better.
I can say people in my age bracket, 70 plus, guys, I mean, we will get prostate cancer. I mean, that's practically a given at some point. And so, the question is, what stage is it at? And now the ability to tell the kinds of tumor that are likely to become serious and spread. So I will sooner or later be going to my doctor, and he will tell me I have prostate cancer. So that doesn't have to be a major problem. My uncle had prostate cancer, and he lived, I think, 8 years, and then it came back and spread. Now the thing is, his nephew is like 35 or 40. Now what he did, now this is 10 years ago, so treatments have advanced. So his 35-year-old nephew was told he had stage 1 cancer. The 35-year-old nephew immediately went out and had his prostate removed.
Ouch.
I mean, there's a lot of side effects involved in having your prostate. That's a decision you want to make very, very carefully. But it's that panic, which I understand. But
the medical community admitted that they've been too aggressive in treating prostate cancer. They found out that in some cases, if you just leave it and monitor it very closely, it's fine. So we've basically cut into these people and created all sorts of damage, urinary problems, incontinence issues, and for nothing in many cases. But the great thing about science is we had the best data at the time, told us that that was the most effective thing, but science is about rationality, and as new information comes in, we can change our mind. That's a good thing.
The next story, talking about injectable 3D vaccines, there's the key word, could. And if you could go through that story, my question is, how realistic or practical? How much, this is Harvard University. So, these are pretty smart people. They don't normally make, claims they can't back up. But that's a question I have about this particular treatments they're talking about.
So they said new findings show programmable biomaterials can be delivered using needle injection to induce an immune response and fight deadly diseases. So this is something that's been around for a few years now, and I'm not sure what they're going to talk about here, but let's read through it. One of the reasons cancer is so deadly is that it can evade attack from the body's immune system, which allows tumors to flourish and spread. Scientists can try to induce the immune system, known as immunotherapy, to go into attack mode to fight the cancer and build long-lasting immune resistance to cancer cells. Now researchers at the Weiss Institute for Biology, Biologically Inspired Engineering at Harvard University and Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences show a non-surgical injection of programmable biomaterial that's spontaneously assembled in vivo into a 3D structure which could fight and even help prevent cancer and also infectious disease such as HIV. Their findings are reported in Nature Biotechnology. We can create 3D structures using minimally invasive delivery to enrich and activate a host's immune cells to target and attack harmful cells in vivo. So tiny biodegradable rod-like structures made from silica, known as mesoporous silica rods, MSRs, can be loaded with biological and chemical drug components and then delivered by needle underneath the skin. The rods spontaneously assemble at the vaccination site to form a three-dimensional scaffold, like pouring a box of matchsticks in a pile on a table. The porous spaces in the stack of MSRs are large enough to recruit and fill up with dendritic cells, which are surveillance cells that monitor the body and trigger an immune response when a harmful presence is detected. Nano-sized mesoporous silica particles have already been established as useful for manipulating individual cells from the inside. But this is the first time that larger particles in the micron size range are used to create 3D in vivo scaffold that can recruit and attract tens of millions of immune cells. So synthesized in the lab, the MSRs are built with small holes known as nanopores inside. The nanopores can be filled with specific cytokines, oligonucleotides, and large protein antigens, or any variety of drugs of interest to allow a vast number of possible combinations to treat a range of infections. Although right now we are focusing on developing a cancer vaccine, in the future we could be able to manipulate which type of dendritic cells or other types of immune cells are recruited to the 3D scaffold by using different kinds of cytokines released from the MSRs. By tuning the surface properties and pore size of the MSRs, and therefore controlling the introduction and release of various proteins and drugs, we can manipulate the immune system to treat multiple diseases. Once the 3D scaffold has recruited dendritic cells from the body, the drugs contained in the MSRs are released, which trip the surveillance trigger and initiates an immune response. The activated dendritic cells leave the scaffold and travel to the lymph nodes, where they raise the alarm and direct the body's immune system to attack specific cells, such as cancerous cells. At the site of the injection, the MSRs biodegrade and dissolve naturally within a few months. So far, the researchers have only tested the 3D vaccine in mice, but have found that it is highly effective. An experiment showed that the injectable 3D scaffold recruited and attracted millions of dendritic cells in a host mouse before dispersing the cells to the lymph nodes and triggering a powerful immune response. The vaccines are easily and rapidly manufactured so that they could potentially be widely available very quickly in the face of an emerging infectious disease. We anticipate 3D vaccines could be broadly used for many settings and their injectable nature, but also make them easy to administer both inside and outside the clinic. Since the vaccine works by triggering an immune response, the method could even be used preventatively by the body's immune resistance prior to infection. Injectable immunotherapies that use programmable biomaterials as a powerful vehicle to deliver targeted treatment and preventative care could help a whole range of deadly infections, including common worldwide killers like HIV and Ebola, as well as cancer. So these injectable 3D vaccines offer a minimally invasive and scalable way to deliver therapies that work by mimicking the body's own powerful immune response in diseases that have previously been able to skirt immune detection. All right, so you know what? What that sounds like is they're able to modulate the size of these nanopores. And when you do that, whatever sort of immune response you're looking for, my understanding from this is they can release the right size, the molecule size, because all these different cytokines or whatever they happen to be modulating for a part of the immune system, if you open the nanopore to the correct size, you're going to get different types of, call them natural immune drugs that are released into your body. So they modulate the size of the nanopores, and that allows those types of dendritic, which is a broad spectrum of immunity, and it will allow them to be distributed amongst the lymph nodes if you have some sort of lymphatic cancer or something. So it's I never would have thought of doing that. It reminds me of we've talked about PCR technology in the past. And biologists use PCR very, very commonly. It's been around forever. It stands for polymerase chain reaction. And the old school way of doing this, invented in the late 70s, early 80s, they basically take DNA and they heat it to a certain level that the double helix breaks apart. And as it breaks apart, the polymerase allows for, instead of one double helix, it builds two. And they use it for amplification. You can amplify certain parts of the DNA, not the whole thing, but just parts. Doing things like this was very laborious and stuff. So other technologies came up to basically get into sequencing and understanding, reading the letters of the DNA as you move forward. And they got really good at reading DNA, but they came up with a really simple way of reading DNA, and it's using nanopores. And there's actually a nanopore technology made by, it's that laptop USB-looking stick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've shown that before. I think it's actually the name of the company. It's Nano something. It's in the UK. And the reason the sequencing techniques are getting so quick at reading through DNA to read the genome is because they're forcing DNA of a certain size to go through the nanopores, and as it's going through the nanopores, it's entering only certain things of a certain size can enter, there's an electrical current across the nanopore. And based on the level of resistance as it's passing through the nanopore, that determines the nucleotides going through, whether it's A, C, G, or T.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can do that at very high speed. So all you're doing is measuring resistance through every single nanopore. And that makes it cheaper and easier to do. So that nanopore technology for sequencing reminds me a lot of how they're doing it with this, except they're using it for drug delivery using your own immune system.
Wow. Nanopores. I had not heard of nano. Everything is nano now, but the scale with which you're working at is mind-boggling.
Yeah, they found ways to create these tiny little
pores, and you're talking about DNA itself is very, very small thing.
Below the wavelength of light, way below.
I mean, it's wow. How could they build the technology to do something that? And then the pores themselves are obviously very, very small, but you have something at this scale that you can manipulate.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of complex engineering and physics and all sorts of technology, and they're doing it. They're mass producing it. Once they figure it out, they mass produce it and get it out there. So the future is looking brighter.
Well, you're getting that immune response. You're getting that you're getting the immune response, and it doesn't sound to me like the chemicals you're using to initiate that immune response are going to be anything like, normal cancer treatments, you're killing immune cells. And here, in fact, that's one of the major side effects, isn't it, for a lot of different treatments, is the fact that the natural defense mechanism, the immune response, is suppressed. In this particular case, you're using the immune response. You're not suppressing it.
See, they don't get into specifics, and I'd like to know a little more about what they're doing, but they didn't talk about it. They talked about the scaffolding technique, which they can modulate the size of these pores, but they didn't talk about, there's two different types of immunity. There's innate immunity, which is sort of it's the initial broadsword when you get sick. It's very non-specific. It's like a very blunt instrument that just kind of crushes everything, and it keeps a virus or bacteria at bay. And then there's the adaptive response, which is your body's pharmacy is making T and B cells, which are very specifically coded to go after whatever pathogen is in you. So, what exactly are they doing with the technology? What are they putting? What are they testing with, and modulating these pore size with? What have they actually done? And
this particular, what you're reading is a press release put out, and one of the blogs that I rely on for science news, Science Daily, at the end of their stories, they always have a link to the abstract. And that's something that's very useful because, like you say, the press release here doesn't contain the kind of detail that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'd sure like to. I think they've really found something interesting. It might be a question too of they're protecting their ability to patent. You never know.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's okay. But the great news is they're doing it in vivo in mice, which is, it's not a petri dish. And when you're doing it in a mouse, it's a lot more promising than the petri dish. So it's moving along. They're probably trying to create, getting the evidence together to get permission to do a clinical study on it.
I'm gonna jump to a space story.
Okay.
And this is a participant in this Hangout, Amy Lynn. This is an article she wrote in Spaceflight Insider. And let me go to the article because it will show you some interesting pictures instead of you guys staring at my blank head as I read the story. Screen share. There really are some neat pictures here, though. And this is the Cygnus spacecraft. And this is, they have resupply missions to the International Space Station. And so they're going to be using, and they had that last catastrophic failure. And so for their next mission, they're going to be using the Atlas V rocket. And there is a picture of an Atlas V rocket. There's the explosion. Following a catastrophic explosion in October, resulting in the loss of a Cygnus spacecraft, complete with valuable crew supply items and scientific experiments, Orbital Science Corporation has announced plans to return to Wallops Flight Center in 2016. On December 9th, the company announced the plan to fulfill its commercial resupply agreement with NASA and will resume cargo flights to the International Space Station as early as next year. Their plan to return to flight will include at least one flight atop a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket before we are introduced to an upgraded Antares launcher. All cargo deliveries will be completed within contact deadlines at no cost increase to NASA. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The flight will be scheduled for late 2015, and if necessary, there is an option for a second flight in 2016. The Atlas V rocket will launch from Cape Canaveral's Space Launch Complex 41 in the 401 configuration, the most common for that vehicle. Due to its increased lift capacity, the Atlas V 401 will enable Cygnus to carry 35% more cargo than previously planned. Bring ahead a little bit more. The Atlas V has been the go-to vehicle for a variety of launches, including classified, military, and government payloads. However, the Atlas V has also been responsible for launching planetary missions such as the New Horizons in 2006, Juno in 2007, and Mars Science Laboratory's Curiosity rover in 2012, and the Mars Atmosphere and Volatile Evolution MAVEN mission in 2013. So it has a great record of success. Typically, Cygnus flies the top Antares rocket launched from Pad OA at NASA's Wallops Flight Center in Wallops, Virginia. Antares' first stage is composed of two Aerojet Rocketdyne AG-26 engines. Now, the AG-26 began its life more than 40 years ago as an NK-33 engine manufactured by the Kuzanov Design Bureau in the former Soviet Union. The engine was intended to be a replacement for the NK-15 engine on the failed Soviet N-1 moon rocket. All 4 launch attempts failed. However, the program to land cosmonauts on the moon was canceled before the NK-33s can be used, and the engines were stored in a warehouse for 20 years. Rocketdyne discovered and purchased approximately 40 of the NK-33s in the mid-1990s. After refurbishment and upgrades, including the installation of advanced electronics and a gambling steering capability, the engine was rechristened the AJ-26. And Orbital Dulles, the Dulles, Virginia-based company, purchased 20 for use on Antares. You know, I'd like to have been there to see the Russian guy in his sales pitch. We got these rockets. Okay, we know they're 40 years old. and we know they've been sitting in this warehouse, but we put the latest upgrades on it, and it's spectacular. And NASA bought it, or at least the orbital people bought it. The AJ-26 has a less than stellar testing history and has suffered at least 2 recent failures. Now, getting back to one of the most recent failures, following an investigation into the explosion, it was determined that a turbo pump on the AJ-26 engine failed, resulting in the loss of the vehicle. Prior to the explosion, Orbital had been rumored to be on the hunt for a replacement for the troublesome AJ-26 engine. As a part of the plan to move forward, Orbital has confirmed the ability to accelerate the introduction of a new main propulsion system for the Antares rockets. So they're going to keep tinkering with this thing. As a result, the company has announced that 3 CRS launches will take place on the 1st, 2nd, and 4th quarters of 2016 and will utilize the upgraded Antares. Fingers crossed on those. The flights will be in addition to the Atlas flight and will fulfill Orbital's commercial resupply agreement with NASA. Originally, they were scheduled for 8 flights, but thanks to the added cargo capacity of the Atlas and upgraded Antares vehicles, the 8th flight will not be needed. Well, the upgraded Antares will be equipped with a greater payload performance, allowing Cygnus to deliver in excess of 20% more cargo per flight than prior plans. The first new component of the upgraded propulsion system are expected to arrive at the Antares final assembly plant in mid-2015 to begin vehicle integration and testing. A new hot fire test will be scheduled late in 2015. In addition to the vehicle upgrades, launch site repairs were also required and expected to take 20 months to complete. Damage at the Pad 01 at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Space Airport was not as extensive as first thought. And boy, and I thought when I looked at that explosion, I figured it just wiped out the launch pad. But it says minor repairs, cleanup, and reconstruction requirements have been assessed and will be completed by the fall of 2015. Once repairs have been handled and pad recertification will need to take place. So that really shows you how sturdy those pads are.
Quite the ball.
You know, my first question is, of course, they're still going to go with Antares. Now, I gotta believe that must be a commercial decision, because it kind of sounds like this Atlas V would do a better job. It has a 35% bigger payload, and its record is a much better record than Antares. So I don't know if we're talking about the contract they can't use. I don't know. Yeah, continuing to upgrade and use this, you know, this 40-year-old rocket. I don't know.
It's a question of what's winning out, politics or science.
Yeah.
You know, are they going with the data, or is the politics winning out?
Yeah, this clearly has got to have been an economic decision. You know, and maybe when they first, at that time, when they first started using it, they didn't have the Atlas V. They didn't have an alternative. They kind of didn't have any choice. Okay, I can see that. But now they've got an alternative. And man, if this, I mean, the risk factor, this thing blows up again, it's going to cost them a bunch more money, and it just might be better to use the Atlas V.
Exactly, yeah.
Head scratcher.
Must be an economic decision.
And I can imagine. Well, that's what I was looking for. I was helping Amy, who wrote the article, with beer, because I was in be interested in her take. I don't know. I tell you what, if they were going to put a flight, you know, like a manned flight on top of that thing, and I'm the astronaut, I kind of might wave my hand and say, wait a minute, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody check out that ball of flames? You don't want to be like that. Oh, the Antares, that was the one that blew up, right?
Yeah, that was the. I mean, it's had failures before.
Yeah. So, yeah, and did they purposely detonated that, right?
I'm not. You know, they might have. They might have realized there was a failure. There was a failure happening, and to explode it while it's closer to the ground, rather than letting it explode while it's higher up, spreading the damage over a much wider area. I think you're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have astronauts on board, that process, hopefully there's some sort of, I don't know what sort of escape system they can have.
They have an injector.
Do they?
Yes, they have an injector. I don't know if it's ever been used or how well it works. I'm sure it's been tested. But I know they do have a way of injecting themselves out of that particular capsule.
That would make a really interesting show sometime to talk about that process. How do the safety systems work? How they've been tested, how proven are they? What are your chances of survival? That'd be an interesting discussion.
Why don't we go on to another health story? Do I have a third health story there, I think?
Yeah, the compound for...
Yeah. Maybe you can go over that and once again let us know how really promising this is, your take on it.
Okay, well, I'll give you my take, my novice look at it. So, promising compound rapidly eliminates malaria parasite. An international research collaboration led by St. Jude Children's Research Hospital reports that the rapid action of plus-minus SJ733 will likely slow malaria drug resistance. Human safety trials of the compound are planned. So in Memphis, an international research collaborative has determined that a promising anti-malarial compound tricks the immune system to rapidly destroy red blood cells infected with malaria parasite but leave healthy cells unharmed. The compound was developed from a molecule identified in a previous St. Jude-led study that helped to jumpstart worldwide anti-malarial drug development efforts. Malaria is caused by a parasite spread through the bite of an infected mosquito. The disease remains a major health threat to more than half the world's population, particularly children. The World Health Organization estimates that in Africa, a child dies of malaria every minute. Wow, that's incredible. So in this study, researchers determined that this compound uses a novel mechanism to kill the parasite by recruiting the immune system to eliminate malaria-infected red blood cells. In a mouse model of malaria, a single dose killed 80% of malaria parasites within 24 hours. After 48 hours, the parasite was undetectable. That's impressive. Planning has begun for safety trials of the compound in healthy adults. Laboratory evidence suggests the compound's speed and mode of attack, or mode of action, work together to slow and suppress development of drug-resistant parasites. Drug resistance has long undermined efforts to treat and block malaria transmission. Our goal is to develop an affordable, fast-acting combination therapy that cures malaria with a single dose. These results indicate that other compounds that act in a similar fashion are highly attractive additions to the global malaria eradication campaign, which would mean so much for the world's children, but are central to the mission of St. Jude. Whole genome sequencing of the Plasmodium falciparum, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the deadliest of the malaria parasites, revealed that this compound disrupted activity of the ATP4 protein in the parasites. The protein functions as a pump that the parasites depend on to maintain the proper sodium balance by removing excess sodium. Sequencing effort was led by co-author Joseph DeRisi, PhD at Howard Hughes Medical Institute, investigator and chair. So the researchers showed that the ATP4 triggered a series of changes in malaria-infected red blood cells that marked them for destruction by the immune system. So the infected cells changed shape and shrank in size. They also became more rigid and exhibited other alterations typical of aging red blood cells. The immune system responded using the same mechanism the body relies on to rid itself of aging red blood cells. So another promising class of anti-malaria compounds triggered the same changes in red blood cells infected with the malaria parasite, researchers reported. The drug called spiroindolinus, maybe, also targeted the ATP4 protein. The drugs include NITD-246, which is already in clinical trials for treatment of malaria. Those trials involve investigators at other institutions. The data suggests that compounds targeting ATP4 induce physical changes in the affected red blood cells that allow the immune system or erythrocyte quality control mechanisms to recognize and rapidly eliminate the infected cells. The rapid clearance response depends on the presence of both the parasite and the investigational drug. That is important because its levels uninfected red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes, so laboratory evidence also suggests the mechanism will slow and suppress development of drug-resistant strains of the parasite. Planning has begun to move it from the laboratory into the clinic, beginning with a safety study in the drug in healthy adults. The drug development effort is being led by a consortium that includes scientists at St. Jude, a Swiss-based nonprofit Medicines for Malaria Venture, and a Japanese pharmaceutical company called Elsay, I think it's pronounced. Hopefully I got that right. And there's a kind of a fancy picture there.
Yeah, I'm going to screen share.
Perfect. A red blood cell infected with a malaria parasite, which is the purple part, is treated with an experimental molecule. The molecule blocks a pump that maintains the parasite's sodium balance. And as the sodium increases, the infected cell starts to resemble an aging cell. The infected cells are eliminated the same way the body gets rid of aging cells. Wow. So a macrophage will come in and eat it up with just part of the body's natural janitorial system. It's going to chew that sucker up because it looks like it's an aged cell. So I wonder what else they could use that in, because that technique could be used for probably different things. But
sure.
Yeah, everybody's moving into this immunocellular area, and there's lots of new drugs coming up, sort of using our own immune systems to either reprogram it or use it in such a way that your body's natural defenses will take out these pathogens.
That's interesting. How they're once again using the body's own immune response. Like I say, it's just natural. They're turning this particular cell, making it seem like it's just an old dying cell, and let's get rid of it. That's just to think about it. To come up with that idea is pretty interesting.
We're reprogramming our biology. We really are. That's what's happening here. All these different approaches, we're reprogramming our biology, or reprogramming our software.
I mean, you wouldn't even be able to, until you have the kinds of technology that could observe these cells and observe how they're interacting, etc. I mean, you couldn't even think about doing this 10, 15 years ago, let's say. But now that you can see it, all of a sudden you all have these genius ideas about how to go about dealing with the problem.
Yeah, everybody's taking a stab at it. We're learning very quickly which techniques are more successful.
I'll go back to another space story, and actually there's two related stories dealing with the future of space missions, which is going to have to be collaboration. And as I say, I have to apologize to the Chinese. I've been dissing their space program for quite a while now. But this is an article, once again, by Amy in Space Flight Insider. And the Chinese fleet, they celebrated their 200th mission launch. The Chinese successfully launched an Earth-observing satellite in conjunction with Brazil. There you go, that collaboration. I never even thought of Brazil. as having its own space agency, which it does. The fifth satellite produced from this collaboration, the Chinese-Brazilian Earth Resources Satellite 4, Cybers 4, lifted off from the Thailand Satellite Launch Center atop a Long March 4B rocket at 11:26 a.m. local time, December 7th. The mission signaled a major milestone for the Chinese as it marked the 200th launch in the Long March family of rockets. 200 launches. The launch is a major milestone for China as they are now members of an elite club of 3 nations that have launched 200 rockets, joined by the United States and Russia. And Li Fengpai, chairman of the Chinese Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, the main contractor for the space program, told, XNHUA in Chinese, Zunu, or something like that. China has become the 3rd country after the United States and Russia to complete 200 carrier rocket launches. Long March rockets will make at least another 100 launches in the next 7 years. And China first began manufacturing carrier rockets back in the 1956, with the first Long March having launched in April 24th, 1970, with China's first satellite, the Dongfeng Han-1, into space. The rockets are designed and manufactured by the Chinese Academy of Launch Vehicle Technology, and they're a subsidy of the Chinese space program, and have become the go-to vehicle for delivering satellites and spacecraft into orbit. So far, the Long March family of rockets has been responsible for launching 250 satellites and spacecrafts, including China's first space lab and lunar orbiter. Between the first launch and the 100th launch on January of 2007, there were 7 failures, they say. However, between launches 100 and 200, the number of failures reported is 2. According to the Chinese, this is a better safety record than the United States. And the thing is, in the past, I've always questioned Chinese statistics on something like this, but nowadays you cannot hide a rocket launch failure. They've got satellites and everything. So, I mean, you can certainly question whether there were only 7 failures, but recently I say you've got to accept the fact that their record is pretty good, possibly even better than the United States is.
Yeah, they've learned quickly.
China is an example where once their government gets behind something, they're not going to have the financial restraints that you will see in places like the United States. The Long March, however, falls short in carrying capacity. It is only able to ferry half of what foreign launchers can. Kind of a cheap model, I guess. When they're competing with, you have a competition. That's an amazing thing now. You actually have a competition between people who need these rockets. Then they can choose, from different models. And Chinese has this cheaper version. China currently has 2 vehicles in the works: the Long March 5 and the Long March 7. The Long March 5 is expected to debut within the next 2 years, doubling the amount of cargo space, and could be a competitor with the U.S. heavy lifter, the Delta IV Heavy. Long March 7 is expected to make its maiden flight next year and is expected to handle ferrying cargo up to the space station. The Long March 4B rocket was responsible for lifting the Cygnus 4 satellite into orbit, with orbital insertion occurring approximately 12 minutes after this particular launch. Cygnus 4 is the 5th satellite in the program, which started in 1988 to help monitor and plan land management, forestry, water conservation, agriculture, and environmental protection efforts. And that's one of the great things about the NASA's also launching satellites that will be able to closely monitor what's happening on the land. The first Cyber satellite launched in October 1999. Cygnus 1 with the next two, Cygnus 2, Cygnus 2B launching in 2003 and 2007. Cygnus 3 followed the last in December but was destroyed after a rocket malfunction failure. And Cygnus 4 was moved up to help compensate for the loss of the previous candidate. Investigation following the 2013 failure showed debris blocking the fuel lines in one of the two upper stage engines, resulting in the loss of the satellite. Cygnus 4 is comparable to NASA's Landsat satellite and is equipped with 4 cameras to take pictures of the Earth in both visible and infrared wavelengths. China and Brazil supervised the development of 2 cameras each, with China also constructing the spacecraft's bus. Cygnus 4's orbit is designed so the satellite will be able to observe the same region on Earth once every 3 days. The satellite will be collecting black and white images with a resolution of 16 feet and be able to differentiate between different types of vegetation around water by using its thermal and infrared images. The satellite is expected to produce approximately 700 images per day, and the images will be viewable on the internet. Now there you go. 2 thumbs up for China.
Yeah, that safety record for the next, like after launch 100 to 200, having only 2 incidents is pretty impressive.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
They have got it.
And I did not realize Brazil had a space agency. And it's an example of countries you don't think about that are now getting involved in the space program. And I'll read this from Wikipedia. The Brazilian Space Agency is the civil authority in Brazil responsible for the country's burgeoning space program. It has a spaceport. Brazil has a spaceport. It operates a spaceport in Alcântara and a rocket launch site at the Barrio de Inferno. The Inferno. The agency has given Brazil a role in space in Latin America and technically made Brazil a partner for cooperation in the International Space Station. The Brazilian Space Agency is the heir to Brazil's space program. Previously, the program had been under the control of Brazilian military. The program was transferred into civilian control in February of 1994. In 2003, they had a major setback when a rocket explosion killed 21 technicians. Brazil successfully launched its first rocket into space in October 2004 from that Alcântara Launch Center. And it was a VSB-30 launched in a suborbital mission. Several other successful launches have followed. In 2006, an astronaut, Marcos Pontes, P-O-T-E-S, became the first Brazilian and the first native Portuguese-speaking person in space, where he stayed on the International Space Station for a week. During his trip, Pontes carried out 8 experiments selected by the Brazilian Space Agency, and he landed in Kazakhstan in 2006. Here's another interesting part of this. The Brazilian Space Agency has pursued a policy of joint technological development with more advanced space programs. Initially, it relied heavily on the United States, but after meeting difficulties from them on technological transfers, Brazil branched out, working with other nations including China, India, Russia, and Ukraine. They had problems working with the United States. Now, I always figured the United States would be very good at working with other countries. Here's in one case where it didn't work out. It's also very interesting to me.
Just looking at your other stories here. I've got about one more. We've got a house full tonight, but
okay.
Did you want to pick one, or?
No, you can. Well, let's see. Which one do you want to talk about? Well, the technology. Let's see. What do we got here in technology? We've got nanoscale resistors, quantum devices. And we've got Stanford engineers take a big step forward using light instead of wires inside computers. Whichever you want to talk about.
Let's do the nanoscale resistors, because I love quantum. Do you want to do that, or?
No, well, you can talk about that one.
Okay. Nanoscale resistors for quantum devices. Researchers from the London Center for Nanotechnology have made new compact high-value resistors for nanoscale quantum circuits. The resistors could speed the development of quantum devices for computing and fundamental physics research. The researchers described the thin film resistors in an article in the Journal of Applied Physics. One example of an application that requires high-value resistors is the quantum phase slip circuit. A QPS circuit is made from very narrow wires of superconducting material that can exploit a fundamental counterintuitive quantum mechanical property called quantum tunneling to move magnetic flux to and fro across the wire over energy barriers that would be insurmountable in the everyday world of classic physics. In 2006, scientists from the Kavli Institute of Nanoscience in the Netherlands proposed that a QPS circuit could be used to redefine the amp, a standard unit of measure for electrical current, by linking it to fundamental properties of the universe. Other scientific groups have also proposed using QPS devices as qubits in quantum computers, the fundamental unit of quantum information at the heart of such computers. Resistors are needed to isolate the fragile quantum states in QPS devices from the noisy classical world. Standard materials used to make resistors for integrated circuits do not typically provide enough resistance in a small enough form to meet the requirements for QPS circuits. Warburton and his colleagues turned to the compound chromium oxide to create new high-value compact nanoscale resistors. The researchers created thin films of chromium oxide using a technique called sputtered deposition. They were able to tune the resistance of the chromium oxide films by controlling the oxygen content of the films. The higher the oxygen content, the higher the resistance. Replacing chromium with oxygen affects both the numbers of electrons available to carry current and also the availability of paths for electrons to hop through the material. Researchers cooled their transistors to 4.2 degrees Kelvin and measured the resistivity for a range of oxygen to chromium mass ratios. Poorly conducting materials such as the chromium oxide thin films the researchers tested generally have high resistance at low temperatures, and any resistor used in a QPS device would have to operate at a cold enough temperature that quantum effects would dominate over classical effects. For the resistors with the highest oxygen content, the researchers measured a resistance high enough to be compatible with most QPS circuit requirements. The team also characterized the contact resistance of one chromium oxide thin film at an interface with niobium silicon. Creating a QPS circuit with niobium silicon nanowires would be one way to measure a new quantum standard for the amp. The team found that creating a gold intermediate layer between the chromium oxide and the niobium silicon layer lowers the contact resistance, a favorable outcome. The team next plans to incorporate their new resistors into QPS devices. So one thing at a time. Looks like what they've done, it's about basically enabling quantum tunneling to get to that state in a simple way. Of quantum tunneling is basically drilling through, in classical mechanics, drilling through insurmountable barriers that can't be done with classical, whereas quantum tunneling to find like the lowest possible energy state, when you tunnel directly through these barriers, whatever the barriers may be, you can quickly come up with a probabilistic value, and run over several experiments. You can come up with a value that's probably very close to the value that you're looking for. So, yep, they're getting closer, and it's not D-Wave. I'm hoping for D-Wave here. I just read tonight, I quickly looked, I didn't get to read the article, but D-Wave posted something as well.
Oh.
They're hiring someone to work on, it was something like artificial intelligence on their platform. Could be some type of learning based on their quantum device. So I'll be looking at that one too to see what they're doing. But quantum tunneling is extremely important when you're trying to find low energy signatures, and if this resistor gets them there, that's awesome. That's good news.
Yeah, and it's again, it's resistance. Wherever you look, it's the heat, lowering the heat and the resistance.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's quite a bit of resistance going on in the background. I don't know.
Oh, there is. There's a party going on here.
Yeah. We got to let you go and join the party there, Dale.
Exactly. Yeah. So for sure, yeah, no, this was good. I'm sorry I have to kind of cut it short a little bit.
That's okay. We went through a lot of stuff here.
We nailed it. We went through quite a bit in a short period of time.
Yeah. Great. Next week, I'm guessing we'll probably be again on Thursday, the 18th.
Yeah.
After that, between Christmas and New Year's, I'm going to guess we'll probably take a break, unless somebody specifically says they want to have a hangout on a particular date. I think the next hangout was probably going to be the one, TWIS Minion Science Island hangout, until the new year. I know with TWIS, I think their next hangouts, they're going to be making predictions. And there really isn't normally a lot of science coming out at the end of the year anyway.
Yeah, everybody's vacationing.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully I will see you next week.
Okay.
I'll see you.
Doing well. Bye-bye.
There we go. Now I can stop the broadcast.